Hello and welcome to one and all. In today's class, I'm continuing with the law of diminishing marginal utility. The previous class, I explained up to the table illustration and also started with the diagram. So in this class, I'm continuing with the diagrammatic representation and as well as the explanation of that. Okay. So the same table we are representing in the form of a diagram by plotting the points on graph. So x-axis, we are representing the quantity of good X. In our example, we have taken mangoes, isn't it? And y-axis, as I mentioned, we are representing the utility, both the total utility and marginal utility. So if you are plotting the points as per our table, then we are having from up to 100, isn't it? So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 and 100. Then y-axis, the units of commodity consumed. So in our example, we have taken up to 6 mangoes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. And negative satisfaction minus 10. So if you are, first let us plot the total utility curve. So as per our example, so it is the first unit, the consumer is getting 40 utils. Second unit, 70. I mean, you can draw neatly with the scale and pencil. Okay. Third unit, 90. Fourth unit, 100. Fifth unit also 100. And sixth unit, it is falling down to 90. So now, if you join these points, you are getting the curve. That curve is the total utility curve. Okay. So now at this point, A, the consumer is getting the maximum satisfaction. So this is the point of satiety. You can write why it is a point of satiety. At this point, total utility is maximum. Okay, or let me change the alphabet so that the explanation will become easier. Okay, so now let me mark this as point A, this one as point B, this point as point C, and this point as point D. So the curve is divided into A, B, C, and D. So at point C, point of satiety, where the total utility is maximum. Okay. Now just connect this in dotted lines. So at when the consumer is consuming the fifth mango, he is reaching the point of satiety, the maximum satisfaction. Now this is the total. We have finished the total utility curve. Now coming to the marginal utility curve. At 1 unit, the consumer is attaining 40 utils of satisfaction, and then second, so like that it keeps on decreasing, isn't it? 20, 10, and the fifth unit is getting nil satisfaction, and sixth unit is getting minus 10. So this is the satisfaction the consumer is just deriving. So now again join this. This is the, I mean, it should exactly coincide here. That's why I said you draw with us using the scale and pencil. So this is the marginal utility curve. So let me mark here. So already up to D is over. This is point E and this one is point F. Okay. So now we have to give the explanation of the diagram. So explanation of the just how we explain the table, the same way whatever we exhibited in the diagram, that have to be mention or in the form of explanation in the form of sentences. Okay. So as per this diagram, what x-axis is representing quantity of good X, that is mangoes, and y-axis is representing utilities, this both the total utility and marginal utility. Now this TU, whatever I mentioned here, TU is the total utility curve. So what are all, how the curve is rising, in at which point it is reaching the maximum and at which point it starts declining, that has to be explained. So as per this table, sorry, as per this diagram, which is according to the table. So when you take this A to B, so A to B, what is happening? The total utility curve rises. So A to B, the total utility curve rises. So that is between first to fourth unit. First mango to fourth mango, the total utility is income. That means the total satisfaction of the consumer is increasing when he is consuming from first mango to fourth mango. Okay. Then afterwards, what is happening? B to C. B to C, the total utility is constant. That is, the consumer is not gaining any extra satisfaction. So the total utility is remaining constant. That is between fourth and fifth unit. Okay. And then what else is happening at fifth unit? At fifth unit, what is happening here? The total utility is maximum. So here the total utility is maximum. So if you have to put in the word, the consumer gets maximum satisfaction when he is consuming the fifth unit, isn't it? And then afterwards, what is happening? Let me clear this. Can pause the video and write the instructions, okay, when you are watching. Since I don't have space here, I'm erasing this and writing. You have to continue the answer. So then afterwards, at D, or in other words, let us continue with the at C, the total utility is maximum where or when the consumer reaches the point of satiety. Anything you can let the consumer get the maximum satisfaction. So when fifth unit is consumed or when 5 units are consumed. Afterwards, what is happening? Between C to D, the total utility declines. Or in other words, at D, that is when the consumer consumes the, as per the table, D is when the consumer consumes the sixth unit. So when the consumer consumes the sixth unit, the total satisfaction decreases, isn't it? So this is what we have represented in the diagram. So the same thing you have to explain in the form of sentences or in the form of words also. So this is as far as the total utility is concerned. Okay. And then moving on to the marginal utility. So what are all the changes that is happening in the marginal utility based on the margin, how the marginal utility curve is decreasing. Okay. So next, moving to the marginal utility. So marginal utility curve is represented by MU. So MU represents marginal utility curve. So just you can mention here at this point, MU is equal to 0. At this point, point F, MU becomes negative. As much as information, if you are giving in the diagram itself, then it is much better. Okay. So the MU represents the marginal utility curve. Now what is happening here? A to E. This point is E. A to E, the marginal utility curve continuously declines. Continuously decreases. That's it. That is from first unit, when the consumer from the first unit to fifth unit. The marginal utility continuously decreases. At point E, that is at fifth unit, the marginal utility becomes equal to 0. That means what? The consumer is not getting any additional satisfaction. And between, this is at point E, A to E, and then between E to F, marginal utility continues to decline, continues to decline, and at point F, marginal utility becomes negative. So that is what is the meaning? That is, the consumer is getting dissatisfaction. The consumer is getting the dissatisfaction when he is consuming the sixth unit. So you can mention here F at sixth unit. Okay, so this is how the marginal utility curve declines. So this is what the law of diminishing marginal utility is trying to explain. Now, based on this, we can bring out the relationship between the total utility and marginal utility. So when you look at the curve, what all we are finding here, from A to B or A to C, the total utility continuously increases. So when the total utility is increasing, what is happening to the marginal utility? It continuously decreases. So when the total utility is reaching this maximum point, so at that point, marginal utility is becoming 0. And still, when the total utility starts declining at point D, the marginal point F, the marginal utility becomes negative. So this is the relationship we are finding between the total utility and the marginal utility. And to put it, what is the reason, what exactly is the marginal utility, and why marginal utility is decreasing when the total utility keeps on increasing? The reason is, marginal utility is nothing but the rate of change in total utility. At what rate the satisfaction of the consumer keeps increasing, that is measured by marginal utility. So we all know that the satisfaction of the consumer, the total satisfaction of the consumer, is not increasing at an increasing rate. The total satisfaction of the consumer is increasing at a decreasing rate. So you can see that here the gap keeps on decreasing here, isn't it? If the total satisfaction of the consumer keeps on increasing, then every successive unit should give him more and more amount of utility. Initially it is 30, then it is decreasing to 20, isn't it? So it's like that, 40, 30, 20, it keeps on decreasing. If the total satisfaction keeps on increasing, then how the it should be, initially it should be 40, then later on it should be more than 40, that is it should be 90, and then later on it should be more than 50, So like that, the total satisfaction should keep on increasing, but it is not happening like that. The total satisfaction of the consumer, when he keeps on increasing the consumption of the commodity, is increasing at a decreasing rate. So the marginal utility is nothing but it is just measuring what is the rate of change in total utility. So that's why this is increasing at a decreasing rate. The marginal utility keeps on decreasing. Okay. And at one point of time, it reaches the maximum. Beyond that level, so the marginal utility is becoming minimum. After that, still further consumption gives the dissatisfaction to the consumer. The total satisfaction itself declines. So that is why this is the kind of relationship we find between the total utility and the marginal utility. Okay, hope it is clear. So moving on to the next information we have to present is what is the relationship between total utility and marginal utility. Okay, so the first relationship what we are finding is when total utility increases at a decreasing rate, that is A to B. Marginal utility decreases. Now diagram A to E. That is the first relationship we are finding out. Then the next one is the when total utility is maximum. So at which point it is maximum? As per our diagram, it is maximum at point C. Marginal utility is minimum or 0. That is at point E. And third one, when total utility declines, the total satisfaction itself declines, that is between C to D, the marginal utility becomes negative. Isn't it? So at point F. So this is the relationship we are finding between the total utility and marginal utility. So this law is just mentioning that the consumer keeps on, I repeat the same statement, the consumer keeps on consuming the same commodity. The total satisfaction will keep on decreasing, meaning every additional successive unit of consumption is giving him lesser and lesser amount of satisfaction. At one point of time, he will reach the saturation point. Beyond that level, he will not be able to consume anymore. This is a natural human tendency. This is applicable not just for 1 or 2%. This is a universal law. It is applicable for each and every person. Okay. So the same thing, how Marshall defined this law. So definition by Marshall. Now you will be able to understand the definition that is given by Marshall. So what did he say? How Marshall quoted this law? That is starting with inverted commas. As I mentioned, every definition quotation should be mentioned within the inverted commas. So what did he mention? The additional, I repeat again, you are expected to memorize the quotations. The additional benefit which a person derives from a given increase in the stock of a thing diminishes, with, every increase in the stock that he already has. So this is a quotation. So again, in order to understand, first additional benefit. Okay. Now let us find out what is the meaning of this additional benefit. So additional benefit is nothing but the marginal utility. Isn't it? The additional benefit here represents the marginal utility, the additional satisfaction. So additional benefit. So additional benefit which a person derives from a given increase in the stock of a commodity. So now what is that increase in stock? So increase in stock here represents the increase in the quantity. So we keep on increasing the consumption, isn't it? The stock of mangoes keeps on increasing. So increase in the quantity. So what is of a thing here? So what is this word thing here means? The thing here represents the good X. In our example, we have taken this as mangoes. So anything for that matter. What is happening to this? So the additional benefit, what happens to that additional benefit? Diminishes. So diminishes with the every increase in the stock. So that additional benefit keeps on decreasing with every increase in the stock, with every additional unit of consumption. So if the consumer keeps on increasing the consumption of any one particular commodity, that additional benefit, that additional utility will keep on decreasing. So this is what Marshall is trying to prove with the help of a table and diagram. Okay. So even though it is only a hypothetical table and diagram, it is applicable to each and every person. No person can keep on consuming the same commodity again and again, in spite of the fact that that person likes that commodity so much. Okay, beyond a certain level, everybody will feel fed up. Okay, no consumer can consume that much amount of commodity of the same commodity continuously. So this is what the law is implying. Okay, now what is there is a connection. Why this law? What is the relevance in economics? Because how the seller, at what point of time the seller should stop selling that particular commodity, at what point of time the consumer should not be vomiting, isn't it? At what point of time the consumers should stop purchasing that consumption or the purchase of that particular commodity. So all these are implied in this law. Okay, so before explaining that, let me explain to you what are all the assumptions on which this law is based. So if you remember, when I was explaining about the microeconomics, this is a microeconomic subject matter. When I was explaining about the microeconomic analysis, I mentioned to you microeconomics is based on certain conditions, certain assumptions. So one assumptions, if you remember, one assumption it is based on is full employment. The country will always be under the condition of full employment. Another assumption I mentioned was the marginal analysis. So now you are coming across the marginal utility. So all the laws of microeconomics is based on this marginal analysis. Since we are talking about the consumption here, it is marginal utility. If you are talking about if you are discussing about the production, then it will be marginal productivity. So like that, every law is based on the marginal analysis. That is the last unit consumed. What is the satisfaction we are getting? Last unit produced, how much is the output produced with the last employment of labor, etc. So microeconomic analysis is always based on the marginal analysis, taking into account only the last unit. And there is another one I mentioned to you, ceteris paribus. So that is other factors remaining constant. Ceteris paribus. I told you this is a Latin term meaning all the other factors remaining constant. Now this is what the assumption. What in framing this law, we have taken into consideration only two things. The total utility of commodity X is a function of quantity of commodity X. So there is no other factor is affecting the total utility of the commodity, only the quantity of commodity X. So when we are bringing out the relationship between the quantity of commodity X and the total satisfaction of commodity X, we are assuming certain other things to remain constant, that is ceteris paribus. So now let us check what are all the other things that is assumed to be remaining constant. Okay, so the first assumption under this is something called as rationality. So it is assumed that the consumer is rational. So now what is the meaning of rationality? That is, the consumer, whereas in the law is assuming that the consumer always acts rationally. So when I say rational, normally every consumer will try to get that maximum satisfaction with this, with the limited amount of money income a consumer is having. He should spend in such a way that he wants to get that maximum satisfaction. See, for example, in our example, as per this 60 unit if he consumes, he's getting the dissatisfaction. To put it practically, he will vomit. Will any rational consumer will go on consuming mangoes in such a way that he will start vomiting? Then that is an irrational consumer. So we are just bringing out what point of irrational, when the irrationality stops. Okay, so the consumer will not go to the extent of vomiting. The consumer will not go to the extent of buying up to 6 mangoes. He will stop somewhere before that. He has to stop somewhere before that. Then only he is a rational consumer. Okay, so that is the meaning. We are assuming that the consumer is always rational. That is, the consumer always tries to get that maximum satisfaction. He is not acting irrationally. That is, to put it very simply, in our example, he is not vomiting. Okay, he is not going to the extent of getting dissatisfaction. That is the first assumption. Then the second assumption is the cardinal measurement of utility. I already mentioned to you what is the meaning of cardinal measurement. That is what we have measured the, in our example, we are measuring the total utility and marginal utility in terms of numbers, cardinal numbers, isn't it? So it is assumed that, so this assumption means that utility can be measured in cardinal numbers. So we are assuming that the consumer is able to measure his satisfaction in cardinal numbers. I mean, these are all not practical not possible in the practical world, but still we are assuming. Okay, these are all, that is ceteris paribus. That is, all the laws of economics are based on certain kinds of assumptions which are the conditions. This is only for the sake of simplicity. Only if you assume all this, we will be able to bring out the relationship between total utility and quantity as well as the marginal utility. Then the third one is the independent utility of goods. So when I say independent utility of goods, so in our example, we have taken only mangoes. So the consumer is consuming one mango after another mango and is comparing the satisfaction which is derived the first mango with the fourth mango, fifth mango, and sixth mango. So that means what the utility derived by mango by a consumer after consumption of mango is not depending upon the utility he is going to get when he consumes orange. So, see, suddenly, so for example, suddenly, if we say that after consuming 2 or 3 mangoes, suddenly, if the consumer wants to switch over to oranges, then you will not be able to measure or you will not able to identify the satisfaction after consuming mangoes keep on decreasing. Okay, so for the time being, we are assuming that in order to measure and compare the satisfaction derived by the consumer after consuming one particular commodity, we are assuming that the utility of commodity X is not depending upon what the utility the consumer is going to get in after consumption of commodity Y. So that is independent utility of goods. Okay. Then the fourth assumption is constant marginal utility of money. Constant marginal utility of money. See here, this is a very basic law. We have not taken into consideration the price element, isn't it? We have, it's a very simple law. We are taking only one commodity, one good, and what is the satisfaction the consumer getting the one good, and what is the uh, uh, satisfaction is going to get. So we have not taken into account any other commodity. That's why independent utility. And we have not also taken into consideration price. So now assume that if the consumer has to keep on one mango after another, if the consumer has to keep on paying money also, his pocket money keeps on decreases, isn't it? Decreasing, isn't it? So if the pocket money keeps on decreasing, he will not be willing to purchase all the 6 mangoes. So if he's not purchasing all the 6 mangoes, we will not know that the consumer is getting the maximum satisfaction at 5th mango. The consumer is getting the dissatisfaction at the 6th mango. We will not know. So that means what? He is not bothered about the decrease in the quantity of money, whatever he is having. That means the utility of money remaining constant to him. First unit when he's consuming, first mango when he's consuming, how much satisfaction he got out of the pocket money, the same satisfaction is having even after consumption of 6th unit. Even though the pocket money decreases, he is having the same satisfaction with that amount of money. Okay, so that's why the constant marginal utility of money. Because if the consumer starts giving importance to the decrease in the pocket money, he will not go to the extent of purchasing up to 6 mangoes. We will not know that he is getting the dissatisfaction. Okay, then fifth one is the homogeneous units of good. That means all the mangoes, all the units of the same taste, same taste should be same, size should be same, quality should be same, everything should be same. That is the identical homogeneous units of a good. If the second mango is better, tasting better than the previous mango, the comparison will not be, it's not correct, isn't it? So all the 6 mangoes should be of identical. So homogeneous units of a good. Going by the same thing, the size should be uniform size of the goods. Uniform size. That means the whatever the commodity taken should be neither too big nor too small. Okay, it should be one full mango. Then only we will be able to, the consumer will be able to measure his satisfaction. And uniform size. Next one is no time lag. So consumer continuously keeps on continue without any gap. Then one day he will be able to measure the satisfaction. If one mango is consuming today and another mango after 2 days, then the comparison will not be able to compare. We will not be able to know that the satisfaction keeps on decreasing. And then the next one is the divisibility of the commodity. Whatever the commodity we are taking in question should be capable of being divided into 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units. So that's what, 1 mango, 2 mango, 3 mangoes. So it should be capable of being divided. And no change in consumers' behavior. Thus I mentioned, suddenly you should not say that all these days I was liking mango. Suddenly my preference changed to oranges. So there's a change in consumers' behavior. That is an irrational thing. So no change in consumers' behavior. And finally, consumer has full knowledge of the market conditions. Consumer has full knowledge. He has the full knowledge of what is the demand, supply, and price conditions in the market. This is also one of the component of consumer being rational. Okay, so no time lag, divisibility, no change in consumer behavior, and consumer has full knowledge of the market conditions. So based on these assumptions, the law is framed, and the law states that under these assumptions, under these conditions, if the consumer keeps on consuming the same commodity, the satisfaction keeps on decreasing. So that's what is being explained in the form of a table and diagram. Okay, so now there is some more points left over. We have to find out what are all the limitations of this law and what are all the importances, what is the practical importance of this law, which I will explain to you in my next class. Okay, so if you have any doubts, please don't fail to mention in the comment box. This is one of the basic laws of economics. I repeat again. And if you find this video useful, please like, share, subscribe. And until my next class, next video, take care. Bye-bye.